Forge your inner armor.
Welcome to our monthly webinar for Royer Neuroscience and Inner Armor. Actually, you can have anybody come if you want to, but this is specifically something what we designed that's for Royer Neuroscience clients that are in the program. We hit different topics, and I was asked about, what topic are we going for this month? And there's a lot of cool things we have going on, really cool things. We have some neat research projects that are off and running. This entire third grade class in San Jose, 75 students, really cool, that I'd love to kind of talk to you about at some point. We have this really neat research project at a medical school that we recently got some data back that showed a lot of things about breathing and heart rate and processing speed that's really worth talking about too. Had a huge research project that just started at Hope College, looking at pre and post sleep, pre and post emotional factors, pre and post overall performance in school with 60 students. Really another cool thing going on there. We're doing actual sleep studies on all of these students, pre and post, which is really cool. Just a lot of things going on. The new core app that we're still in test phase, but it's a lot of excitement about that. We'll probably have a webinar soon on that. And always kind of bringing up Tsunami, the book that came out in the last couple months. All of you that are listening to this that are clients of Royer Neuroscience should have gotten a copy within the last couple weeks. So that's really cool. But the topic that came up, because more so the time of year, is sleep. So we're back to sleep again. Not so much getting into all the science of sleep, because that is something that you can listen to past webinars on. Let us know if you want to listen to that, where we talk through all the science. Then we have full podcasts on this, 3 to 4 episodes of podcasts that talk about it. You can use even our chat bot, which will answer questions about sleep that we've talked about the chat bot before. You'll be hearing more of that, trying to get that out and in your hands, but that's a great resource for asking any questions about sleep. But we thought we'd put together some sleep tips. So this webinar is really about sleep tips, things that you can do. And rather than, because you're probably right in the middle of some sleep stuff if it's January or February. And so really covering those tips. So as we get into it, I want to lay the groundwork a little bit. I was wondering about some statistical differences in sleep patterns and specific disorders that are related to sleep. One in particular is a seasonal affective disorder. Seasonal affective disorder is a mood disorder that impacts people during different times of the year, not during different times, during the winter months when it's much darker, and it's closely tied to sleep. And so I was just kind of wondering, I've lived in different parts of the country. I grew up in Tampa and then spent 26 years in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I can tell you that I noticed a ton of difference between different places that I've lived. We recently moved down to Georgia and then back up to Charlotte, and it's totally different than sleep patterns and mood during certain times of year. So I asked, I've looked some of this up before, but I asked what are the differences in seasonal affective disorder between Anchorage, Alaska, and Quito, Ecuador? So here's a question for you. Why would I pick Quito, Ecuador? Does anybody have an idea of, I picked Anchorage. We can probably figure that out. Anchorage definitely has issues with light and that kind of stuff. But why Quito, Ecuador? Anybody got an idea? Come on, guys. Just take a shot at it. Anybody? Ecuador?
There. There's more sun.
Is warmer, sun.
Location. Equator.
Equator. There we go. Okay. So that's because Ecuador, Quito, sits. This is a crazy stat, right? It sits on the equator, pretty close to it. The variation in sunlight from throughout the entire year is 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Okay. In Grand Rapids, where I used to live, that's not Anchorage. Okay. Grand Rapids goes from 9 hours to 16 hours difference from the summer solstice to the winter solstice. That's a massive shift in light. And once you hit about 20 degrees, 30 degrees from the equator, things start happening to people because they get further away from light. And the difference in Anchorage, Alaska, in seasonal affective disorder, there is a 25% of people have full season. That's 1 out of 4. Full seasonal affective disorder. That's a depressive disorder. And then up to 35%, 25 to 30% have subsyndromal. So they haven't met all the criteria of this depressive disorder, but they are substance. So 35% outside of the 25% with full. In Quito, Ecuador, less than 1% have full seasonal, less than 1%. So we've gone from 25% to 1% in full seasonal affective disorder and only 2% in a subdromal. I mean, that's like crazy. So what's going on here? So one last question I asked before I kind of give you the tips is they said, I know because we've researched this and we've done some work for the NBA on sleep. We're part of a consultation to a committee on sleep. Also have a really cool article in ESPN magazine about sleep and how it affects athletes. But I just quickly, hey, if sleep is getting disrupted in the seasonal affective disorder, which it is, we know that the differences in sleep disorders between Anchorage and Quito, not just seasonal affective disorder, but Quito, Ecuador, is a difference of 60% difference in sleep disorders between the two places. So we know that affects it. But then I said, well, what are the medical implications of this? And I thought I was going to get one or two things, right? And the medical implications, and we've researched some of this before, but differences in major statistical difference in autoimmune disorders, the Anchorage being higher, multiple sclerosis, cardiovascular disease, including hypertension, which actually increases in the winter to 25%. In Quito, it's 3%. Heart attacks, higher in the winter, 35%. In Quito, no variation and only 5%. Type 2 diabetes, managed worse in the winter. Obesity, significantly worse. Bone health because of vitamin D issues. Increased fractures, crazy, right? Cancer rates. Of course, skin cancer is higher in Quito, but every other cancer is worse in Anchorage. One's especially tied to vitamin D dependent cancers like breast, colon, and prostate. Infectious disease, viral infections, immune system functions, reproductive issues, fertility rates, and birth outcomes. These are all related to underlying issues with sun exposure and how that impacts sleep. So the number one tip that we want to talk about, it's obvious there's an issue related to steady, even sunlight and massive variations. We know, the statistics prove that. So when it kind of disruptions in melatonin rates because of that. So because of that, our first tip is about light. Okay, light. Very important that we're getting a lot of blue light in the morning this time of year and that we're getting no blue light at night. So blue is what sets this circadian rhythm in these winter states and areas of the world that are further away from the equator. They're not getting much blue just by the nature of not getting any sunlight, but it's very important, and the intensity is much lower. Very important that we get more blue light in the morning. And there's some great devices that you can get online. I like to use something called a human charger, where you actually get light through the ear canal. But primarily blue light, it has to be over 10,000 lumens of blue light. And there's a lot of different things that you can get, that you can find that meet that criteria, that are $50 or less, that you exposure to blue light in the morning. The first 3 hours of sunlight, very, very important, will significantly impact sleep. On the inverse, we don't want blue at night, and we get that from devices like iPhones, iPads, HD image on our computers. We want to not let that blue light in, because that's going to disrupt the circadian rhythm that's already a little bit out of kilter if we're in some of these northern places. There's a great app that you can put on your computer called f.lux. F.lux. You can download it. It's a free app, and it's really cool. It looks at your computer, the clock on the computer, and it determines where you are, and it starts to add more blue in the morning on your computer. You don't barely even notice it. And then it takes away the blue and puts more red and yellow and orange at night. Okay. And so light, number one. Then I brought in a special guest speaker to tell us about the next tip. And so our newly minted master's graduate, Ian Richardson, is going to share with us this next tip. Welcome, Ian.
Thanks, Doc. Appreciate that. So on the heels of talking about blue light and how important it is, especially to set your circadian rhythm, talking about when we need to get it in the morning and also when we don't need to get it at night, kind of wanted to talk about more actionable things to do at night instead of not doing things. A lot of times we can get carried away and taking things away. Don't do this, don't do that, especially when we're trying to take away blue light. It takes away a lot of activity that people are used to capping their night with, whether it's watching Netflix, whether it's doing, trying to get ahead of the next day, getting ahead of emails, or just being on their phone, kind of idle, looking at a lot of stimulating images. So on top of the screens and not getting enough blue light, it's also good to pay attention to protect what we call protecting the hour before you're going to sleep. So not just leaving it up to any type of tool to set your circadian rhythm for yourself, but behaviorally being very conscious of when you want to be going to sleep before it's time to go to sleep. It's very common that we kind of chloroform ourselves into sleep in a very unrestful way, kind of abruptly. It's kind of like the sun is dropping out of the sky. That's not really how things work. We don't just go from abrupt light to absolute darkness. There needs to be, your brain does a lot better when there's a more of a gradual process to doing that. And you'll find that your sleep is more restful instead of a lot more surface level, a lot more light sleep than the deep and REM. So substituting, instead of just simply taking away activities, instead of engaging in highly stimulating activities such as Netflix, social media, things that we can't automatically get away from, but for a very specific time right before you're going to sleep, it can be very helpful to substitute that for something like reading a book or doing laundry, doing any sort of housework, house activities, things that are not as stimulating to your nervous system. It doesn't seem like a super impactful thing, but there's a lot of power in allowing your nervous system to go slower, allowing your brain to go slower before we want to do what we call is landing the plane instead of, nose diving essentially. So on top of, again, the things that Dr. Royer is talking about, being able to cut out that blue light, it can be very abrupt to working in the peak performance area. A lot of athletes say, well, what do you want us to do? Instead of, where you tell us not to do this, not to do that. And what we find is a lot of people, and especially, it's a good time to also do inner armor breathing training, which everyone should be exposed to at any time. It's a good time to set that down. But picking something that your nervous system and your brain over time can find triggering or synonymous with going to sleep. Picking one specific thing and sticking with it for a longer period of time. So when you start to engage in that, your brain and your nervous system get better at the skill of getting into a restful state We think of sleep as being something that automatically happens, but the quality of your sleep can really be determinate and dependent on those behaviors that you do leading up that leading up to it. You can set yourself up for success or for failure based off of just the behaviors that you do, not even taking into account genetic or environmental differences that you have. So we feel like we've had a lot of success with people who've had a long struggle with getting to sleep or getting quality sleep, even though they're spending a long time in sleep, being able to pick something that's not as stimulating and leaning into that aspect of doing something that is a lot slower, a lot less stimulating, that allows them for that next 6, 7, or 8 hours get a more restful sleep. It's not something that's going to knock you out like melatonin does, but something that's more sustainable in the long term if you commit yourself to a kind of sleep routine that supports a more restful, deep sleep instead of a quick supplement like melatonin, which your brain can become dependent on, and that just further dysregulates your internal nervous system. So we want to help your brain. Your brain does a really good job of anticipating things. So if your brain can anticipate that it's about to go into a restful state, then it's going to do that a lot more successfully.
Awesome. That is really good. That whole kind of wind down. Um, it's like preparing to sleep, right? Not just, there's a great quote from Ronald Reagan that said to the Olympic athletes, it's not just your will to win, it's your will to prepare to win that makes you an Olympic athlete. And I think as a sleeper, a great sleeper, it's not just, hey, I want to sleep, but am I preparing to win? And I love what you're talking about, Ian, is doing those things physically for yourself, taking care of yourself, winding down, and especially watching the light exposure. So we're going to give you 3 sets of tips here. And this is actually taken from a project that Ian and I did with the 49ers. Most of you know that Ian works at the 49ers, has been there for years now. But sometimes when we start the year, we provide educational resources to the athletes, and we'll do a talk, an educational talk, and kind of set the tone. So we did this on sleep and recovery a few years back, and I wanted to share them with you and challenge you guys to maybe adopt one of these um, tools. Okay, so let's go ahead and not off there. Okay. So this was our talk on sleep and recovery, but I wanted to point out, we won't go through all this, but here we go. We had 3 levels, and I want you to think, what level do you want to be at? And then we propose this to the athletes. Like, are you just kind of wanting to just kind of do a flyby on this sleep and do some basic things? And so we created, Ian and I, the bronze level. What are just the basics you need to be doing to help improve your sleep? Then we created the silver level and the gold medal, or the gold levels, maybe kind of consistent with that Ronald Reagan quote, right? The Olympics, right? So this is what we think. Here's some tips, right? Close the blinds in your room. Okay, that's back to our light exposure. We want to be very careful with how much light is coming in. So making sure that the morning light, any light from the street lights or from outside, or even a moon that's, full moon can impact that. So closing the blinds in the room, super important. Sorry. Wear an eye mask and earplugs. Amy, my wife and business partner, this is like 101 for her. No matter where she goes, she has this eye mask with her when we're traveling. When we have visitors to our house, they'll find on their pillow will be an eye mask. She's a big eye mask. We have tons of them all over the place. But they're a great, simple tool to use to help with light exposure. We don't think about it much, but get a comfortable one and use that. Earplugs, those can be super helpful. Then we haven't spent a lot of the educational process. If you want to learn more about this, listen to the podcast or watch some other videos. But we want to turn the temperature down in the room. Okay, the lower we can get it, the better. Your circadian rhythm of your sleep cycle is set on lowest body temperature, which happens around 4 a.m. It's called your body nadir. So the more we can assist the dropping of the temperature, the deeper we can get into the sleep. And if the room is too artificially high in temperature, it can prohibit that dropping of the body nadir. So if you like to, you don't like the idea of it being cold, then put a bunch of blankets at the foot of your bed. And then throughout the night, unconsciously, you will adjust that. But don't keep the temperature high. Put your phone on do not disturb. Super important, basic, but just the psychological task of doing that based on Ian's input. What about if you did that an hour before bed? That would be interesting, right? That'd be helpful. And then don't use the TV to go to sleep. Okay. Don't do it during sleep time when you've carved out this time to prepare. The most valuable thing that you will do for your body and brain, the most productive those two things will happen in sleep. If you're too busy, you have too much going on, you need to be sleeping more, not less. So very important that you understand that. And if you need more information on that, again, listen to the information on our podcast and videos. The silver level. Okay. We're back to this temperature thing that's super important. There's ways to control your bed temperature with some different cooling devices. These are great. The 49ers have used in the past this 8 Sleep, which is a cover on the mattress that actually changes body temperature or changes the temperature, and it keeps the body cool. Kind of the original player in this place was Chili Pat, but these are really good devices that help keep the body cool. There's different times in our stages of development where there might be major hormone changes that affect body temperature. That's for both men and women, that having this can help out a way to cool your body. Install room darkening shades. Now we've got another step. Let's add that. Let's really get the room controlled to its darkness. Maintain the consistency in sleep-wake. You have what's called a sleep window, and that's a period of time that your circadian rhythm will be optimized. And that's really based on peak melatonin production that happens at midnight. So the more consistent I can be getting to bed prior to that, closer to like between 9 and 10, so that I can hit that melatonin peak and use that for the rest of my sleep, and keeping that consistent over time. Adjusting this is really problematic. We know people that do, very well documented, people that have shift changes where they have to work night shift and then back day shift, have almost every recorded medical illness is worsened by that shifting of the sleep. Remove your phone from the room. Actually, don't even put it, not just do not disturb, just don't put it in the room. Don't put other devices. And then practice, as Ian said, the inner armor breathing 5 minutes before bed. Also, blue blockers after sunset. So if you want to be a silver level, boom, this is what we'd recommend. Okay. And if you want to see these things, we'll send these to you so you can kind of, and then I'd love to hear, hey, I'm going to go for a silver level. I'm going to be silver level, or I'm going to be bronze. What am I going to do with my sleep? Okay. And then the last level, we call it a diamond level, Ian. I wonder why we did that instead of gold level. Do you remember?
Sure. I'm not sure. I think it was maybe too close to bronze in terms of the color. I'm not sure.
Okay. And Ian's all about the color. He likes the variations. I mean, anything that goes out to you guys, Ian has to preview it to make sure that all the brand colors are working correctly. So it's diamond level. Diamond level. Install custom blackout blinds. So there's custom ones that you can actually get installed that close every little thing, not just room darkening, but custom ones. Remove all tech from bedroom. No tech, no routers, none of that stuff. Get it out of the room. A blue light device in the morning, whether that's a human charger light or any type of light that will give you more blue in the morning. Again, 10,000 lumens for 20 minutes once you wake up. Biometric lighting, now we're really going there. We actually have lights that we can get you that you can hang on the wall. You can do different things with it that will let you actually change the lighting based on what the lighting changes are happening in Quito, Ecuador. So you could be in Anchorage, but the light on the wall is changing its level of blue, yellow, red. Even if it's dark outside, it's changing to match what the most optimal light exposure is, which is right at the equator. We have these lights in different professional facilities, which is cool. Like the 49ers, we have those. We've had those at Portland Trailblazers, at the Orlando Magic, Cleveland Browns. We've used these lights, which is pretty cool. Then this other thing is really awesome. Gut smashing. And if you need more information on this, you can talk to one of your coaches or feel free to reach out to us. But gut smashing is a technique where we activate the vagus nerve. And what we're doing there is that is your body's brake pedal. That's what slows everything down. And sometimes that may not naturally kick in. So a couple things activate it. One is really good diaphragmatic breathing, kind of pushes up against it and kind of wakes it up so that it will do its job to slow you down, which seems kind of paradoxical, but we need that vagus nerve to do its thing so that we can then calm down. The gut smashing is actually taking a kickball, a very soft ball, and lying on it and putting it below your rib cage and breathing into it to put some pressure against that nerve there so it can activate that parasympathetic slowing down. This works really, really well. If you want to know more about that, let us know. And then strongly recommend, I mean, if you're a diamond, you got to do this. Read Sleep Smarter by Sean Stevenson. So it was, these are some different things. There's a lot more if you need more information. Again, listen to the podcast, also talk to your coaches. And does anybody have a question? Let me know. I got the answer here earlier on the equator. Good job. Okay. Any questions from the group that's listening in?
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes for some people that we work with, I mean, their circadian rhythm is way out of whack, and getting to a spot where they have a healthy circadian rhythm can seem very overwhelming. So they are trying to get to, they're coming from, they're not able to go to sleep until 2 o'clock in the morning or so, and they're trying to get to 10 o'clock. That's a pretty big jump for that. What are essentially your philosophy? What's the best way to think about that and kind of tackling such a big gap from going from chronically so late or early in the morning, so late in the night, to a more responsible time that is more manageable?
Yeah, I think one of the first things is to kind of go through a checklist and figure out what's kind of got them off kilter, right? Is it some nutritional things they're doing? Because your diet and how you're feeding yourself has a big impact, and the times of day that you do that, big impact on that. So, what are they doing in that arena? What are they doing in the light exposure arena? What are they doing in their activity level? Are they exercising too late at night? Our big issue when we were doing a lot in the NBA is their actual job happens at 8 p.m. And then they're put under these very high volume lights so that you can get HD image for TV. And so their brains would think that it's morning. And a lot of these guys couldn't go to bed until like 3 or 4 a.m. because of the way that was working into their schedule, but also because they release a lot of adrenaline, right? Now, they couldn't necessarily choose that, but most people can. So if you're engaging in, a Call of Duty, game at 10 a.m. and, you're doing all this stuff that's elevating your adrenaline, this from previous lectures, if you guys have listened, is adrenaline works inversely of melatonin. So if I'm doing anything to elevate adrenaline, just forget your melatonin, because now you've gotten rid of it. And in doing that, you have completely disrupted your circadian rhythm, because we need to let the melatonin come in, because the melatonin is a very kind of respectful, cautious kind of hormone, in that it says, if adrenaline's here, I'll take a back seat, because adrenaline must be important to keep this person safe. But what it doesn't realize is sometimes humans were stupid, right? We're the only creature on the planet that deprives ourselves of sleep. We're the only one that does that. And so, I wish melatonin would say, forget you, I'm still going to do my thing, but it waits. And if adrenaline's on board, then it fades away. So you really need to look at those variables, that choices and decisions and nutrition and things that get in the way. And then just start to work backwards slowly. Let's get an hour bed earlier for a week, right? Then let's add another hour. This is not something that's not going to be built in a day. And if you think that, then you don't understand the beauty and wonder of sleep. I mean, it is a gift given to us. And a lot of times we just trash it and don't realize that we need to cherish and take care of this gift of sleep. And it's such a huge factor in how our brain's going to look when we're in our 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, that we have to take care of it. And so that a lot of that's education. Amy and I in particular, I'd say the last 15 years, 10 years have been super committed to our sleep. But that isn't to say that we've always been that way. I mean, I can remember in my 30s and early 40s, not that way. I would do dictation and 1 a.m, I'd be doing stuff on my computer. And I started to realize how impactful sleep will be on my current health, but future health, and my needing to be innovative and creative in running a business, and realizing how important sleep is to that early 40s, I decided I'm going to become a great sleeper, which is kind of funny, right? But I said, I want to be a great sleeper. That did not happen instantaneously. That took time. And I'm happy to say, almost 15 years later, I do think I'm a great sleeper, but that's a trained skill just like anything else. And it reaps huge dividends for me. So, long answer to your question, but thanks for asking that, Ian.
Great question.
Anything else before we shut down?
Yeah, we have one more specific to eating around bedtime. Angie said, at what point should all eating be finished by for best sleep?
Great question. So some of that's gonna, well, there are some absolutes. And then there's also things to be thinking about, stages of development, and people might be doing some intermittent fasting. And so that plays into their not eating at all. But we do want to understand that as we get older, that our cells and how they manage sugar and insulin and those things are more fragile. And so many times we actually might need a little bit of protein and fat close to bedtime. Not a lot, but enough to kind of carry us through the evening, especially as we get older. And I also see this in elite athletes that can't have problems sleeping, is like they don't realize it, but they've been pushing their bodies so hard that at 3 a.m. their body's needing something. And they should have prepped that by adding more proteins and fats, not just carbohydrates, which are kind of like you're building this fire that needs to last all night long, right? And carbohydrates are like paper that you're throwing on the fire and then, but then it burns out really quick. Fats and proteins are more like these hardwoods, right? And so we need to be strategic about those before bed. That, again, not a ton, but like a fistful, to be thinking, how am I feeding the fire? If you're having issues with awakenings, which many adults, older adults, will have this 2-3 o'clock awakening, and that may not just be brain stuff out of balance. It could be nutritional things out of balance. So I'm definitely not a big fan of carbohydrates for anybody late at night, but there may be some need for that. And then I also say to people, if you are waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, put beside your bed, I mean, it's not like it's a new thing to you. It's been happening every night for 6 weeks, right? So prepare for it. Like Ian was saying, preparing to get to bed, prepare if you're going to wake up. And one of the first things I want to do is get some type of nutrition in you right when you wake up. So whether it's a little nuts, like some maybe almonds or pecans or something, or a little bite of a protein bar, a glass of water for some hydration, just a little bit of something to throw on the fire before you even think about why am I awake, right? Just get a little snack in you. That does two things. One, it helps with the blood sugar stuff. But two, in order to digest food, your body has to go into a parasympathetic state. And you've woken up because of more of a sympathetic or a fast response. You'll understand some of this stuff if you listen to other podcasts. But I want to reverse that crisis or fast response. And so causing my body to digest just a little bit makes it want to go into the parasympathetic. So definitely, if you're an artist client, this is something to, send us an email about or run something through your coaches to us if you have some more specific questions. Okay, great. You guys, we went a little bit longer. Hopefully this is helpful for you. And Ian, our special guest, who I'm guessing we're going to see more of down the road. Thank you for presenting. Okay?
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Doc.
See ya.
Bye.
Forge your inner armor